What if the real danger in your life isn't failure, rejection, or even oppression, but something far more subtle? The seductive comfort of being powerless. Most people think of powerlessness as a curse, something to escape at all costs. But what if I told you that we often fall in love with it? That deep down, many of us cling to it like a warm blanket, even while it quietly robs us of life. Today, we'll explore why the feeling of being powerless can be so attractive and so destructive. And to do that, we'll bring together two unlikely voices: the Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung, who warned us about the shadows lurking inside our own psyche, and French philosopher Michel Foucault, who revealed how power doesn't just control us, but actually seduces us into obedience. By the end, you might start noticing how often you've chosen the illusion of helplessness because it felt safer than freedom. Let's begin with Jung. Jung believed that much of what drives us lives in the unconscious. The shadow, the part of ourselves we deny, repress, or project onto others. And here's the shadow truth: powerlessness is often chosen. Think about it. Blaming fate, society, your partner, or your boss feels easier than facing the terrifying reality that you could change things, but haven't. Powerlessness lets us avoid responsibility. It shields us from the risk of failure. Psychologists call this learned helplessness, the belief that nothing you do matters, even if the door is open and you could walk out. But Jung would say it's more than conditioning, it's an archetype. The victim archetype lives inside us all, and when it dominates, we mistake weakness for virtue. You see it in toxic love, where people stay in relationships that hurt them because the role of the powerless victim provides identity, sympathy, and a strange sense of stability. You see it in careers when people accept soul-crushing jobs and repeat the phrase, "I don't have a choice." But here's the darker twist. This isn't just personal psychology. Entire systems profit from it. Michel Foucault, one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century, argued that power isn't just about repression, about rulers telling you no. Power is productive. It creates who you are. From schools to prisons, from hospitals to corporations, institutions are designed not only to control you, but to teach you to control yourself. That's where power becomes seductive. It convinces you that obedience is safety. Foucault often used the metaphor of the panopticon, a prison designed so inmates never know if they're being watched. The result? They police themselves. They internalize the gaze of authority. Sound familiar? That's social media, that's your office surveillance software, that's the unspoken rules of your family or community. We end up seduced by powerlessness because it feels less risky to obey, to stay small, to disappear into the system. And that's where Foucault meets Jung. The external forces of power reinforce our inner archetype of the victim, the prison walls and the shadow handshake in secret. Jung believed archetypes were patterns in the collective, unconscious, timeless roles that live inside every human being: the lover, the hero, the trickster. But one of the most dangerous archetypes is the victim. Why? Because unlike the hero, the victim doesn't ask you to act. It asks you to suffer. It gives you excuses, a moral shield, and often sympathy from others. The victim archetype whispers, "You don't need to try, you don't need to risk, just surrender and be carried by the current." On the surface, that feels safe, but Jung warned any archetype left unconscious becomes possession. You don't play the role plays you. And here's the unsettling part. Victimhood doesn't just rob you of power, it feeds your ego. Being wronged can feel righteous, being small can feel holy. But just like any addiction, it drains your life force. We don't have to look far to see how seductive powerlessness has become in modern culture. On social media, outrage goes viral. Algorithms reward victim narratives. The loudest complaint often gets the most attention. And while there are real injustices that must be exposed, there's also a cultural addiction to weakness as identity. In history, entire societies have been conditioned into submission colonial subjects, convinced they had no right to rebel. Citizens of authoritarian states trained to accept obedience as survival. Even in daily life, the same dynamic plays out. People tell themselves, "I can't leave this relationship. I can't quit this job. I can't speak up." And yet thousands of others in the same position find a way. So the question isn't really, can you? It's, have you fallen in love with your chains? This is where Jung and Foucault meet again. The personal psychology of victimhood merges with the cultural machinery of control, and together they form a prison you can't even see. Here's the paradox. Being powerless feels good, at least at first. Foucault showed us how systems seduce us with the promise of safety. Obey, and you won't be punished. Jung showed us how the psyche seduces itself with the victim archetype. Surrender, and you won't be rejected. Together, these forces weave a dangerous lullaby, and that lullaby becomes addictive. Because if you're powerless, you can't be blamed. You can't fail. You can't lose. All you need to do is survive. But here's the catch. Survival isn't living. The greatest danger is not chains on the body, but chains on the mind, breaking the spell. So how do we escape the seduction? For Jung, the answer was individuation, the process of integrating the shadow, owning your darker parts, and becoming a whole person. That means admitting your hidden love for victimhood and saying, yes, part of me wants to be powerless, but I won't let that rule me. For Foucault, resistance begins with knowledge. By seeing how systems shape your identity, you gain the power to resist them. Awareness itself becomes rebellion. It doesn't always mean revolution. Sometimes it means saying no to one small thing. Sometimes it means choosing the harder path instead of the safe one. Sometimes it means creating art, building something of your own, or speaking the truth even when it costs you. The spell of powerlessness breaks the moment you realize you're not powerless. You've just been seduced. So what does life look like on the other side? It looks like responsibility, like saying, this choice is mine and so is the consequence. It looks like freedom, not the easy freedom of escape, but the hard freedom of authorship. It looks like taking your pain, your shadows, your frustrations, and using them as material for creation. That could mean building a business, raising a child differently than you were raised, or writing a story that refuses to be silenced. Transformation doesn't require perfection, it just requires ownership. And here's the truth. The seduction of powerlessness ends the moment you see it as seduction. Before we close, let me offer you something personal. If this video spoke to you, if you've ever felt the pull of helplessness and you're ready to turn it into something more, there's someone you should know. Her name is Gary Nguyen. She's a 29-year-old author currently living in Silicon Valley. By the age of 17, she had already published her first book in Vietnam. And since then, she's written 13 books, novels, short stories, personal essays that have sold hundreds of thousands of copies. Some of her works, like Just Hear Me Out and A Luxury Item Called Me, are available right now on Amazon. Why am I telling you this? Because her books are not just words on a page. They are mirrors. They take the same struggles we've been talking about, powerlessness, identity, healing, and turn them into stories you can feel in your bones. If this video was a spark, her books are the fire. They invite you to go deeper into self-discovery, to see your pain not as a curse, but as raw material for transformation. And maybe, just maybe, they'll help you write your own story instead of living someone else's script. So if you're ready to go beyond this video, I invite you to check them out. I'll leave the links below. The seduction of powerlessness is real. It's psychological, it's cultural, it's inside you and all around you. But here's the ultimate truth. It only has power if you keep saying yes. Jung taught us to face our shadows. Foucault taught us to expose invisible structures. Together, they teach us this. Freedom is terrifying, but it's the only thing worth choosing. So ask yourself tonight, where in your life have you been seduced into feeling powerless? And what would it look like to take even one step toward authorship instead? Because at the end of the day, no matter what system you're in, no matter what shadows you carry, the pen is still in your hand.